Stand to do our Pledge of Allegiances. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. This feels awfully tall. Oh.
I should have done like Maggie did.
All right. We're going to, has everybody had a chance to look over the minutes from the December 19th meeting?
I make the motion that we accept.
Do I have a second? Second by Larry King. All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. Any opposed? Okay. And then next is our regular agenda. And the first thing we need to, on the agenda item is the Zoning Board of Adjustment regular meeting will be held, regularly scheduled meeting is on June the 19th. The city offices will be closed that day, so we have the option of, this room will be available on June the 18th at the same time or June the 26th. Do I have any discussion from anyone on a date that would be better than another one?
I would prefer June the 26th, Thursday, June the 26th.
Okay, Mary Ann's the 26th. Larry, do you have any preference? Okay. What about you, Maggie?
Well, I don't have anything on my calendar for either day,
Okay,
so
all right.
I'm okay with that.
Is June the 26th fine with everyone? Do I need that in
She
a,
said June 18th.
no, you said the 26th, didn't you?
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I said
Yes,
June,
yeah.
I did say June 18th,
Oh,
26th.
Okay,
Yes, you're right.
And board, it just, your preference as a group, you can certainly vote on it, that'd be fine.
Okay.
It's as needed. If we don't have any business for the board at that time, we won't schedule it.
okay. But for right now, if someone were to come in, you'll need to tell them what date that they would be available to be
Yeah.
heard. Okay. Do I need a motion then, I guess, to move our regular scheduled meeting from June 19th to June the 26th?
I make the motion to move the meeting from June 19th to June the 26th.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, our regular scheduled meeting of June 19th has been changed to June the 26th. Okay, the next agenda item is to consider the approval of the amended Zoning Board of Adjustment Rules of Procedure. And I believe Mr. New is going to, are you going to lay that out, or?
I will kind of summarize the number of changes.
Okay.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay,
Mike New, Executive Director of Development and Infrastructure. These rules of procedure are brought to the board following several discussions, not just going back to the August workshop between council and P&Z, where they sort of discussed a number of different zoning ordinance amendments and possible changes. What came from that discussion back in August was the three groups, Zoning Board of Adjustment, Planning and Zoning Commission, and Council, forming a subcommittee, 2 members from each of those groups, and Chairwoman Ward and Forbes. You two are, of course, the ZBA representatives on this subcommittee. So we brought into that subcommittee discussion, there's been, I think, 4 meetings up to this point of various potential changes to the zoning ordinance. We've already brought many of those forward to the council. Some of those were brought forward prior to the formation of the subcommittee. So what you're seeing here, rules of procedure changes were a request of the 2 members of the subcommittee here, just to not only align things better with our existing code, with recent changes to our code, but also some preferences, some gray areas, things that weren't well defined in the current version of the rules of procedure that, if better defined, would lead to better meetings and I think more consistent participation and procedures as a group. So I'm happy to walk through different parts. What I can do is kind of summarize each section. I'm currently on page 13 of the packet. This is the red line version of the rules of procedure document. Behind that is a clean version if you need to sort of reference both. But what I'm looking at is the red line version. Under the organization, officers, and duties, We simply tried to reiterate some changes that have already been made regarding identification of a vice chair. This is something that our other boards have. They do have a designated chair and vice chair. ZBA did not necessarily have that. Their current rules of procedure call that an acting chair, so we've identified a vice chair. That change has already been reflected within the code. It's simply reflected here in rules now, if ZBA chooses to recommend that. What we've also done is there is a state code that references that any rules of procedure established by a board of this type be approved by the governing body, and that governing body is the city council. So this simply establishes that within this rules of procedure document. On pages 2 and 3, going down to the.
Are you on the red line one?
Yes, I'm still on the red line, yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
13.
I'm sorry, page 14. Let me,
Okay.
Oh, okay.
there's an entry at page 2, so I'll try to be consistent. Page 14, that's in the lower right corner if we're all looking at the same packet. Meetings, attendance, so this establishes within the rules of procedure that wasn't there before, a reiteration that attendance of not only regular members but alternate members is expected for each meeting. If there is an instance, and we'll get to the selection of alternate members in a minute, but if there's an instance where an alternate member must be called up, particularly due to conflict of interest, this sort of requires that attendance so that that can be incorporated into board procedure during meetings. We'll cover that a little bit about conflict as well. The other red line's going on 2.2. This is on page 15 now, 2.2. Again, integrating vice chair into that language, and that board members must be in person to be counted as present. Under section 2.3, we've identified, I think this was a selection about rank order. Yes. So section 2.3 was a point of discussion among the subcommittee about how do we select alternate members. Our current process now, I think we've included in the page that Amy left on your desk in identifying an alternate member here today. We have order of, I guess it's precedent or history, term served. What this does is establish alternates in more of a lottery system. So prior to each meeting, the subcommittee members had requested and recommended that there be a sort of a selection process prior to each meeting. How we do that typically is similar to what we do for selection of candidates for a ballot during an election. There's simply a blind drawing, and then whatever number a potential alternate member selects, 1 through 4, the lowest number would be that first serving member called up. And we would do that drawing prior to each meeting, regardless of whether or not there's a known absence. It would be a matter of practice for any meetings going forward if these rules of procedure were approved.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
You said prior to the meeting, I mean, part of the purpose of doing this was to show the public some transparency and fairness. And if it's prior to the meeting, would that exclude any public that's watching on the TV, or?
So that,
Just,
I say prior to the meeting,
it would be before the meeting is called to order and the.
so it could be some, I say prior to the meeting, it could be something we still record. It could be included as a first item of agenda business. Prior to roll call, in meetings and boards I've been familiar with, we've done roll call as a matter of calling to order the meeting to establish the quorum. So when I say prior to the meeting, it could still be a component of the recording of the meeting.
Yeah, it
If
almost
that's-
has to be if there's not a quorum.
Well, it would have to be done before the first time of business is discussed.
Yeah.
So it might follow Pledge of Allegiance, but it would certainly come before any consent agenda review or anything like that, or minutes review.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, we may evolve this to what works best, but the idea is that it be done, right? And that it be known and transparent. So if there's a better way, if we do this once or twice and we may integrate this differently and have it appear differently on the agenda, we'll certainly work through that.
Okay.
Remote participation was another important section. So it was important to establish that because we do have designated alternates, there's an expectation that the board conduct business on schedule when meetings are called, that there shouldn't be an instance of an issue of quorum since you have regular members and alternate members. So also going to remote participation, while it could be allowed, This is simply establishing parameters for what that looks like, and when remote participation is applicable and when it's not applicable. Or is there any questions about that? Okay. I'm going to move to page 16.
I have a question about
Yes, sir.
3.4.
Mhm.
The phrase remote participation is a measure of last resort and may not be used to establish quorum of the board. We know that it can't be used to establish quorum, but where does the language remote participation is a measure of last resort come from?
It's new language just saying if we've exhausted all other measures and cannot identify participation in person, that remote could be used at that time. But
So explain to me exhausting all other measures. So if there's no alternates available at all, then that's the only time that someone would be allowed to remote in?
as a fifth voting and participating member, yes.
If there was 4 people here, and the only way we could get a 5th one was by remotely, then we'd do that.
Well, I think
That appears to be sort of unwieldy and not likely to happen. Because if the person can't be here, then how are you going to get the person here?
Well, they
Even
might be,
remotely.
well, you might be, like at one of the meetings, I was actually on vacation in Colorado. And I could have remoted in from the cabin I was in,
Right.
but they said I wouldn't be able to vote.
Right.
So I
But-
didn't-
But what I'm saying is we knew that in advance. That was known in advance.
Yes, y'all all knew in
And,
advance, that was.
That's not always going to be the case.
Well, you would think that with the way we all are with cell phones now, I mean, I'm on Zoom meetings as I'm driving in my car. I mean, really.
But that's
I mean,
if
we're
the
all-
person is available to do that.
Well, and as we have in here, it's a measure of last resort.
In other
So-
words, if I'm a regular member, and this happened, kind of, and I remoted in and participated in the meeting, but I can't vote if an alternate member
Is present.
is present and can take my place. That, I think the priority is if there's a physical presence, that person takes priority regardless if they're alternate or regular.
Correct.
But if there were 4 people here physically and or an alternate member was remote, I could participate and vote if there was no other person there.
But Maggie, what you just said is not what this says.
I think that's what we discussed,
Mhm.
right, what I said.
So it may need to be,
So what do you think it needs to be changed about it?
well, what Maggie just said, I don't see that here. I mean, I don't see that.
Well, it says if a total of 5 members are not present in person for the duration of a meeting, 1 member may participate and vote remotely by virtual platform. Because if there's less than 4 people here, we can't even have a meeting
But
because we don't have a quorum.
That's not the situation Maggie just talked about, is it?
Well, it kind of sounded like it to me. It was.
I'm sorry, I have to back up. Is 4 a quorum or is 5?
Four.
Four.
Okay.
Remote participation is a measure of last resort and may not be used to establish a quorum. Meaning, if there's only 3 of us here, that remote person on TV can't be the 4th
Right,
person.
right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
But there could be a 5th person.
They could
that
be a
could
5th
participate and
That's
vote.
and participate.
Yes.
If no other alternates or regular
Yes.
members were available to participate,
Right.
yes. Now, what it's lending itself to is obviously planning and scheduling beforehand. There's not really, this would not make sense in a impromptu need for remote participation. This doesn't allow for that. So it would be coordinated beforehand simply to allow that 5th individual to serve
I think it would
in
almost be,
capacity.
instead of it would be kind of like a health issue. You know, that the day of the
Unexpected.
meeting, one of us winds up, can't be here for a health issue or health reason or emergency situation, and the only option available to us is John Sloan, and he's, an hour or 2 away, but he can remote in or something. I mean,
Yeah.
that's where is that how,
But even in, it wouldn't be under emergency situation, you would still have 4 individuals
right,
present.
but if that 5th person wanted to, they could remote in.
I mean, it's done a lot.
Yeah.
It's kind of the new way of
Yeah.
doing things.
Yeah.
I understand being in person too, because people come before the board, they want a person.
Yes.
To look in the eye.
Yes, and I think that's why we said if a total of 5 persons are not present in person for the duration of a meeting.
And I will say, to our subcommittee members' point, that this was kind of tossed, this idea was
Yeah.
kind of tossed.
Right.
And we engaged on several different scenarios and didn't want to so narrowly define this particular category that we boxed ourselves into a corner about how this is done. The interest was to say, in-person participation is prioritized here. In-person participation constitutes a quorum, but remote participation has a place and can be used.
In a limited way.
Now,
Well,
in
no.
practice, I think
Yeah.
these procedures are always subject to change and be modified. So much like some of the other changes, if in practice it becomes impractical or we come across challenges that these procedures don't address, we consider those.
Especially since we revisit them every year.
I know.
And that
But
was in the
that-
original procedure, so that annual review is part of it.
Good.
Okay, are there any other questions on that? There was a balance of trying to be specific enough but not be too narrowly restrictive.
What do you think, Larry?
I just see some issues with it.
Anything that you can give an example of?
Well, I don't see how you're gonna have to do a whole lot of planning in advance.
Yeah, I think that's.
And
yeah,
plus
right.
two, there's gonna be some, I mean, if a person can't be here, like they're in the hospital or something, and you have to have them, then they're not gonna be able to do that. If you
Well,
gotta
I
have,
travel a lot, and sometimes I really want to participate, so
Yeah.
I make the effort to find a place and
Mhm.
zoom in and read all the stuff. I think that's fair. But,
The thing is, like Mr. New just said, if for some reason we come up with, snafus in this, or it just doesn't work, we revisit these rules every year. And we could always amend that portion of the rules to reflect something different.
Sure, and one example, glaring example that came to mind was that one of the previous meetings where board member Forbes had participated remotely and lost connection in the middle of the meeting, temporarily. We did have to stop proceedings. It did delay meeting activity somewhat. What we don't want to have is,
yeah,
and this is why we sort of removed the quorum aspect from this, we don't want to have proceedings continue and then be halted by lack of internet connection or lack of technical difficulty, which is somewhat common with remote participation. Certainly we can improve our equipment, but we don't want that to be a barrier to the meeting. So that was kind of a big sticking point with drafting that particular language. Okay. I'm going to continue. We can certainly come back to that. I'm going to continue to page 17, application procedures.
could I ask a question about,
Yes.
2.5 agendas? There's no indication of when agendas or materials will be provided to board members. Or have I missed that somewhere?
I think there probably needs to be some time in there, Michael, or
I think there
Mr.
needs to
New.
be.
I thought we had that in a different section.
And then agenda shall be for each
Maybe it
meeting
is,
of the
and I
board.
didn't find it in the different section.
doesn't it have to be posted so many days before the meeting?
Well, and I think
Posting
the-
it is different than us getting it.
Yeah, I think the members need to have this a certain time beforehand.
I would,
We send it in the,
Email it. Whenever we post it, we email it on
I know, but what is the date? Is it 10 days before the hearing, or is it 7 days?
72 hours.
Okay.
Where is that rule? Where does
well,
that rule?
and let me just,
so it's in the.
let me just say that getting this on Monday, I believe is when we got it,
Monday at
Was-
3:30,
was,
yeah.
I mean, that's a lot to do between Monday and now, because I have a job, full-time job.
I will say I think it kind of needs to be a little sooner, especially if you already know that, we already know when we're going to be hearing something.
I would think as soon as we know that we're going to be hearing something, we should get the materials.
What's the cutoff for someone to make an application to be on the agenda?
So we don't have all of the details prepared with items. We're doing public notices of meetings and generally have agenda item language drafted. Not all the materials associated with those items for board member review until the day that we post those agendas. So that is generally, when we post those agendas in full, that is when we provide that
That's when
packet
y'all have done your
information to the
homework.
board.
So
Oh,
the
you've done
agendas
all
are
your-
posted 72 hours in advance of the meeting.
Sometimes we get the application at the very last minute, which is like a couple of weeks prior
Uh-huh.
to the actual meeting date, cutoff date. And so, with those last minute applications, doesn't give us enough time to get it to you sooner.
Do you post a deadline for the application to be
Yes.
received by the city in order to be heard that month?
Yes, we do.
Maybe that needs to be a little more.
Well-
I don't know, I mean, personally, I don't have a problem.
We
because
could
it's
look
better.
into that.
P&Z
It just
get
would
like
make it
24 hours,
a little more difficult for applicants to,
yeah,
it would push things out a little further if they had
of
a,
course.
but we could look into it.
Or is the 72 hours, is that something that just you came up with because it seems to work?
It's an Open Meetings Act requirement.
Does it say at least 72 hours? So it could be longer, but it can't be shorter?
Correct.
Okay. And is that for ZBA and P&Z?
That's for all open meetings where agendas are
Oh,
posted
okay,
publicly.
all meetings.
But
if you've
for
got someone-
example-
But if you've got someone who works like Larry and are not retired, then it's very difficult to get this 72 hours in advance. I'm just telling you, because he's got other things to do also.
That's what I say, I'm employed full-time. And,
I know,
and
and
yeah,
you
I
are
know,
too.
yeah, and I will say there's times I've gotten them and I've literally driven the property that morning before I heard it because I didn't have it
Yeah.
in enough time. Had I had it, maybe a few days before that, I might have already been over on that side of town doing an appraisal and I could have swung by there, but I don't know it till 72 hours ahead.
Rhonda has several jobs.
Yeah.
And generally, we try to get it as soon as possible, but sometimes it's just, there's so much going on that we can't get it until the
Until
72 hours.
the actual
But
72 hours.
If it's possible, we'll post it.
But I do
as
think
early
that we
as
need
possible.
the timing in there, Mr. New, on 2.5. An agenda shall be prepared by the secretary for each meeting of the board 72 hours.
Uh-huh, I do too.
Where it?
Very last line, pursuant to the Texas Government Code, Chapter 5.
I know, but we're
But
not
then
going
I'd have to go look
we're
up
not
the
gonna go
Texas
look up
Government
Texas
Code.
Government Code, Chapter 551.
No.
A question about this, about what we're looking at now. Was this ready before 72 hours for us to look at?
No,
Okay.
no.
So,
Can we put that, do we have to make that a motion?
I made a note here, we'll continue in.
Okay, we'll see what we come up
In
with.
discussion.
Okay.
Certainly you can make a motion with
With all the
corrections
other-
as
okay,
advised,
okay.
yes. Where this can move forward, and we can provide that much sooner, so
Okay.
that the board can see what would be presented to the council.
didn't we also discuss regarding agendas, how an item gets on the agenda?
That's over here.
Oh, okay.
Right,
Thank you.
yeah. That's okay, I'd seen that.
I meant to
Yeah.
read through all this before I came, but I work also. It didn't happen. All right, anyway.
Okay. Page 16, some small changes there. Just, again, reestablishing open meetings with the exception of executive sessions, which we've made changes to our standard agenda templates to allow the opportunity for the board to enter into executive session as needed. That's reflected here as well. On page 17,
Could I go back to page 6
yes.
and ask a question? Under C, number 2, it says such special exemption is inconsistent. Is
Where-
that supposed to be there?
What page are you on?
Well,
Page 18.
page 18, I'm looking at the original document, I'm not looking at the.
Yeah, he's on page
I'm on
6
page
here.
6 of the original
C.
document, page 18.
Oh,
if
he's
you're
on,
in
Okay,
there,
gotcha.
right there.
C2, it says such special exemption is inconsistent. Is that "in" supposed to be there?
No, it should be, is
Okay.
consistent.
Okay, that's what I thought, but
Yep.
I just wanted to be sure.
Okay.
All right, where were we?
We're on section 4, page 17. And these application procedures, let me flip forward just a little bit. These are reflective of changes that have already been made to the zoning ordinance for Board of Adjustment procedures by the council. I think this was done in November. We're simply reiterating this, and the goal for placing this information here was to remove the exhibits at the end of the original procedure. There were exhibits basically describing the same procedure. We were embedding it here as part of an application procedures section rather than segregate it from the body of this document. We've also included the call out to special exceptions to distinguish that from variances. That was also consistent with the change that council had recently approved for application procedures. Any questions about that? Okay. Same thing with application requirements. The criteria there, council had reviewed back in November and approved back in November to be consistent with what state code has stated about which applicants may be eligible to file appeals. And then parts B and C, this is on page 19, parts B and C of section 4.2. Again, we're trying to distinguish because our original procedures, our original code did not distinguish between variances and special exceptions rather well. We're trying to distinguish those in the application process.
Can you elaborate on, it's page 19 at the top, the last bullet point on item Roman numeral 2? Any officer, department, board, or bureau of the municipality affected by the decision? What does that mean?
I think that language is directly from the state municipal code.
What does it mean? What about a citizen? Is a citizen?
Only if they are within 200 feet.
Yeah,
No, not on the second part. The second part.
Yes, it says a property
The
within.
second part is, so a regular person that's not an officer,
Has no right.
department, has to be within 200 feet if
Yes.
it's a specific application.
Yes,
If it's not a specific application, it can be any person aggrieved by
For
the
the decision.
And by officer, department, board, or bureau of the municipalities, so that could be like the fire chief or someone on zoning board of adjustments? What does that mean?
I'm going to lean on our attorney here, but because it can be, anything here can be subject to discretion. What does affected mean in particular? So what would justify that effect?
And department, does that mean the planning department could appeal? Or another department in the city could appeal their decision? I know it's
I'm
not
going to
our
go out on a
language.
limb where you may have maybe a historical commission may appeal a decision that could negatively affect the designation of a structure. I'm throwing a random example out there, but that might be an instance where that board would have some stake in a decision made.
It's on specific application or property.
Yeah.
And what if it's a county board member or something? It doesn't say county.
It says municipality.
Of the
That means
municipality.
city though, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Not-
Yeah.
Not.
Not county, no.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And this wording is a change from what it originally was, but this wording is now in the ordinance, correct?
Correct.
That's correct.
The ordinance, the city ordinance has been changed.
Right.
Yes.
This change of the procedures follows
Reflects the city.
already approved ordinance changes, yes.
And the state came up with this language in 2023.
2019.
So, you know, it takes a while for things to filter out here.
Sure. I mean, it's,
8 years.
not to deviate, but that's kind of been some of the direction we've taken in bringing items not only to council, but to the subcommittees for discussion is, as we look into our code, we're not finding everything all at once. We're finding some things we're finding as we go. Are we consistent with state code, right? We don't want to be in conflict and create an issue with rules that we have that should be preempted. And then can we mimic that language within our code? Are there any other conflicts that might be created by doing that? So this is an effort to make sure we are consistent with anything that would be preempted by state law. Okay. I'll keep going. I'm going to dramatic pause for Board Member King. Are you good on that one?
Where are we?
Page 19, 4.2.
The application requirements.
It says,
And it does say on there, you know, any application submitted shall be reviewed by the board office and the chair.
what's that board office? What does that mean?
So I think Amy may have to point out where it's addressed, but board office is defined as the planning and zoning office.
Okay.
Representative office for the board, the staff office.
They would see it and you would see it.
And I would, yes. Or whoever the chair is, whoever the chair is.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson, for bringing that up, because that was a point of discussion too.
Right.
How do we make sure that there's transparency with our designated board officials and our city staff, that when we do receive applications, there's some exchange of information there, short of scheduling a hearing, or where staff doesn't necessarily make the unilateral decision to do that when the board may have an interest in hearing that case. So providing the officer with that first look to make that assessment in conjunction with staff input, that was important to address here in the procedure. Okay. Decision on appeals, this is also reflective. This is at the end of page 19 and beginning of page 20.
Could I ask a question about 4.3?
Yes.
I know we've moved from 90 days to 20 days because of state law.
Mhm.
But 20 days when we don't get things posted for the public to see until at least, I believe, I've been told 7 working days before. That cuts into that 20 days dramatically. And I just want to say now that I'm opposed to reducing to that short of a period of time unless we can guarantee that the public has access to that information of the decisions that are being made in a timely manner.
Because it says date of the decision.
Yeah, we don't have that in the slides that cut out, but so one change we've made, and this is reflective of what our ordinance states already. One change we have made in procedure to kind of facilitate what you're speaking to is we've posted any subdivision change, plat approvals that comes out of our office that we sign off on that are permanent changes to lots or parcels. Don't necessarily, these are admin, including decisions that are facilitated by planning and zoning as well as council. We do have a webpage where those are posted and publicly available to view.
They're posted, but they're posted by address, is that right? And then you have to go elsewhere to find them. And then they're not always there when you go, and they're hard to find. It's not an easy task to get to that information. Because I've done it. I mean, I've gone through all the steps, and it is, I would say for a person that is not computer savvy, it would be a daunting task to get to the information. I mean, it's a list, yes, there's a list posted, but there's no link to click on to go to where you need to go to find the information that you really need. You can look at the list, but that doesn't really give you the information you need.
Okay, what,
You guys?
Can't go to the county clerk's office.
Yeah, you have to go over to
Where
the
it's
county clerk's
recorded.
How would a
office to
person
get that.
looking at this know
Or you can
what
look
the
it
date
up
of the
online.
decision was?
I mean, I know it's still a process.
In the county clerk's office, they have to wait on the appraisal district to come get that plat and scan it in, and then they send it back to the county clerk's office, and that's when the county clerk posts it on their website.
And that might
We
take
can't-
20 days right there.
But we don't have any control over that, that's all.
Well, how would a person know that a decision has been made, and how would they know the date of the decision? Like, say there's a lot next to me, and I'm, I don't see any action over there, I don't know anything going on, and then all of a sudden, I find
Someone's
out
building.
they're putting a Motel 6 there, and it was an admin decision, and I have no way of, how
Or
would
there's a portable building by where you turn in your
or a
subdivision.
mobile home, or whatever, something I
Mary Ann.
didn't like, I would have objected to.
Mhm.
Well, if it's something that
Like you
it could be
split the
approved
lot into
administratively,
four or
it'd be
something.
already approved by right.
Yeah.
Like if they had to do a zone change to put that hotel there, then
Yeah.
there'd be a public meeting and all that.
But what if it was like the thing on Martinsville where a lot was created that upset a lot of people and it didn't really follow the rules? But how would that, if something like that were to happen, how would a person know that
And
that
that's-
decision had been made?
And that's why we went to posting all our plats online, and we also have a online map showing all the permits that have been approved on the
And it's
website.
updated
It's
every
up-
time you make a
every night.
decision, you put it up there that day?
Every 24 hours, it's updated.
Where's
And
that map?
It's on the city website. If you go to the homepage and then go How Do I, and then click on the maps, city maps,
It's called
it's
active
one of the
permits.
maps on the bottom. It's called permits.
I would encourage that you get some average citizens that may not be all of that savvy about computers. And get them to come sit down and try to navigate some of this stuff. It's almost, I mean, I consider myself, I'm not a computer expert by any means, but, I know how to use the computer, I know how to use the internet. It's difficult. I know people that are every day checking that. Every day.
Mhm.
They get up every day and they go and check it. Because that's the only way they can keep up on it and keep on top of what's happening. And,
How would you know the date of the decision? Let's say you go on there and you find it, is the date
Oh.
on there?
Of the permits or the plats or what?
Well, if we follow these rules, we would start counting from the date of the decision, but how would a person know what?
When the decision
Maybe it should say written decision or posted decision, or I don't know. You could say, well, I told them over the phone it was gonna happen. I mean, I know you wouldn't do that, Warren,
But the date would match what's on the recorded document, so
but that happens well after the decision, right?
that constitutes the decision. When those administrative plats, short form plats are approved, and that signature is on the document, that constitutes the date of the decision.
And that's done by the tax office.
Well, when we take it over to the county clerk to get it recorded, they
Yeah.
stamp it, and that's the date that we go by.
well, the date of the decision is the date that the decision is made in the planning office, correct?
But,
Apparently not.
Not, well, are we talking about plats?
yeah, let's distinguish.
Because the plats, the date that we use is the day that the county clerk stamps it. When we take it over there, all the signatures are on it, they stamp it, that's the date that the clock starts.
This wouldn't just deal with plats.
No,
This
this,
is an
this,
appeal
this
for
has to do, yeah, but this isn't, what we're discussing right here is an appeal of the ZBA, correct?
Well, we were talking about the Martinsville plat that
Right.
was accepted administratively,
Right,
and there was no
okay, I get that,
knowledge of,
okay.
or nobody knew it
But
was
from now
approved.
on, we said to help remedy that, that would be a decision made between the city and the chair of the ZBA.
Whether to hear the case.
whether to hear it or not, wouldn't it, or not?
Yes, and as a
If there
matter
was
of
a-
process for an appeal to be heard before the board, there would be a decision to place it on an agenda between the chair and the
Right, if
staff
it was an
person.
appeal, but now I'm following this better now. If someone just comes in and files a plat, I'm not gonna know that because as far as you're concerned, it follows all the parameters.
Right.
But if I were an adjacent property owner, the only way I would know about that is to get on this website that Larry's saying. No one's contacting anyone just when a plat's filed.
No, that's
Okay,
correct.
all right, I'm following that now. And I think we're just saying, I don't know that there's a lot we can do about it, except to educate the public.
Correct, and just kind of put it out there that this information is available.
This information is available, and you need to go check it and make sure something's not happening in your backyard, literally.
Correct.
Okay.
So what other kind of decisions might be made that would have a different date that may not go to the courthouse to be stamped? I'm trying to think of something that would be appealable. I guess it could be refusal to exclusion or.
There's not much. I think most of, it could be, I'm spitballing because we
'Cause if
haven't
it's not
actually
just
had
a-
a lot of these instances, if ever. We issue zoning verification letters. So if someone were wanting to challenge our, or our city planner's assessment of zoning verification for a particular lot, they might appeal that decision of how that particular parcel or lot is classified according to the city planner. Or if they were to challenge a history that created some issue or obstacle for potential investment on a piece of property, and the zoning verification letter was a component of that, which it often is for financing. If they wanted to appeal that, that could be something that's not related to a plat or a permit, that could potentially come before the board.
Or just approving plans, as what one appeal was for Martinsville.
Site plans.
The plans that the city planner approved, building plans.
Okay. So what would the date of that decision be?
Just according to yours.
Because that
issue-
wouldn't be
issue
taken to
date.
the courthouse.
Because that's when it's approved.
Yeah.
Issued.
So on one of those city maps, the new ones, is the permits that we've approved.
Yeah.
And so, once we review the plans and we all approve it, all the departments approve it, then we issue the permit, and there's a date.
Permit issuance date.
The permit issue date would be the date that would start, date of
Do you
approval.
think these details need to be added to this? Because I can see, it's good that we're having this discussion, but you want to have it now and remember it and maybe codify it so that if the situation arises, we're not trying to figure out what to do, you know? I don't know, I'm just, because part of the problem before was nobody was really sure exactly what to do.
On this zoning board of adjustment rules and procedures, are these filed online for anybody to see, or are they just for the board members?
No, they're-
We post the
They're
current version
posted.
online,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
So one thing we certainly have room to enhance or improve is the information that we share that's reflective of these actions. Again, those and how that information is shared and how to make it more convenient or accessible can be certainly conversations we can have to make this a more transparent process. I think that is an effort we are trying to achieve here, not only in updating this rules of procedure, but also sharing what information comes out of our planning office.
So to get to the list of decisions. that- Permits, decisions, where do I click on your,
He said, how do I?
So if you go to the top of the page, there's a how do I
how do I?
tab.
Yeah, and let me ask you that. Why
no,
why
it's-
is it and how do I? And how do I, as just Joe Schmo, know I go to how do I to find that?
Yeah,
could also
maybe a new
search it.
tab that says city permits.
They used to be
Approved
down at the very
permits or
bottom
something
if
like
you
that.
scrolled
That
all the
would
way
be really
down.
helpful,
There's like a
actually.
city maps.
Just,
or,
I mean, as I go to
Changed it.
to page, there's information about planning and, it says planning and zoning, there's notice of public hearings, planning and zoning commission. something that, you know, had notice of approved plans or whatever would be helpful.
Yes, it would.
I mean, I remember now because I called Amy when I was trying to find all this to find out how to get to it, and she walked me through it. But not everybody's going to know to call Amy.
We could make it more prominent on the homepage.
I think it needs to be
Like
more
a
prominent on the
maps-
home plan,
a
and
maps
especially
or
since we've
something.
gone to 20 days from 90 days.
From 90 days to
Yeah.
20.
And plus two, it takes all that time to get all this stuff through the county and everything, then that cuts it down even further. And realistically, we may be ending up with people having 7 days or less to file an appeal.
So this group, we'll make a note. I think we can provide the board with some feedback, plan of action on improving access to this information we're sharing. Whether it's updating navigation on the website, providing additional or different or varying details that allow these items to be searched better. We'll do that sort of outside this realm. We'll follow up. I'm going to give ourselves a deadline of give us a week. And we'll dig through and look at some improvements and navigate that for you. So you have a plan. If you were to share that with somebody else, you can clearly share that with someone
Tell them
else.
how to get there.
But also propose some improvements, and we can do that. We don't need a meeting or recommendation to do that. We can do that already, and certainly be more conducive to now showing this 20 days and be helpful in that regard. So we can do that.
So what I heard was that the date of the decision, if it's something that's recorded by the county clerk, is the date of the recording, which is a stamp. And if it's an internal decision that doesn't go through that process, it would be attached to the permit approval online.
Correct.
And whether or not we include that in here, I think we all need to do that, so it's clear to the person.
And whenever we get planning stuff
appeal-
on
appeal
MGO,
ends
that will
or
also be on that map.
whatever, the
So
appeal
everything will be on the map.
Appellant?
The appeal.
Agreed.
Is that what you call it? Okay, thanks.
That's okay.
Okay.
Larry, would you feel better if we went to 40 days?
Well, we can't.
We can't.
Yeah.
This is city, this is state.
Well,
think-
my question is 20 days the minimum or the maximum? Jerry?
20 days is the maximum.
In state law, it says that's the maximum.
It says not to exceed.
But that's not the state law necessarily. That
Yes,
not
it
to
is. It
exceed
says
is,
that.
it does say that? in-
Yes.
The
We've got some
developers
work to
got
do
in
with
there
our
and do some
legislators.
Strong lobbying.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah. Exactly
Call
what it
your
is.
state representative.
mm-hmm,
Don't worry, I will.
mm-hmm.
We
You
can
wanna
make
call
it
it
shorter,
with
but not
Sure.
longer.
Sure, I will.
I'll also
We'll
call my
start a
state
petition.
senator too.
Not shorter.
That's what it-
Not shorter.
Unfortunately, I don't have the money that
You can go to 10
the
days.
National Builders Association has.
Oh, I'm sure this is was it NTS, what is
Because
it,
that's a
National
big change.
Homeowners
National Home
Builders,
Builders
yeah.
Association.
That's,
It says Home Builders Association, I'm sure they've done this.
Okay, let's move on.
90 might have been too long, but anyway.
Okay.
Moving on.
All right. I'm on page 21 of 42 now. 21. On the red line version, 5.3 procedures for hearing. So this speaks to conflict of interest. Direct personal and pecuniary interest is, again, that's specific language from state law. Essentially saying that if there is a conflict of interest, that be done before the public hearing begins and before discussion of the board commences. That recusal is done prior to anything that may influence board decision-making.
Could I ask a question about, going back to page 19, sorry.
Yep.
Under 4.5, it says the board shall fix a reasonable time for the hearing. And my question is, how do we decide what's a reasonable time? I know it has to be it has to be no later than 60 days, because it says that, but,
So just like in our previous item that you considered about changing that meeting date in June, we've established a consistent and we communicate a consistent board schedule On our website calendar, we put in as needed, but we mark that every month. So we will communicate with the board if there's no business, the board doesn't meet, but that reasonable time is the board could potentially, if there was business, meet once a month. And that is that reasonable time frame.
If someone were to file something and have everything together, they might be able to do it like at the next month's board meeting. If they don't, and they're still gathering site plans and all that, then you're into the second month. Is that not correct?
And sometimes we run into that prior to
Yeah.
posting an agenda.
That's what I'm assuming.
Which would bump a meeting.
Yeah.
Is
For
that
an applicant.
60 days, is that in the state law, Jerry?
Right.
Thank you.
Is everybody clear on what he just said on page 21 on 5.3A about recusing yourself? All right.
I had to look that word up, though.
Pecuniary?
Pecuniary. I had to look it up to make sure I knew what it meant.
Did you have a financial?
Financial
Yeah.
interest, yeah.
Yeah, that's what it said.
My deal is having to say consanguinity.
Consanguinity.
Consanguinity, I'm like,
That has to do with your degree of.
degree of relation. I know, I'm like, why can't they just say
Consanguinity.
if you're related?
That's actually being discussed
Oh,
at
yeah.
the state level right now.
Could I ask a question on page 21,
Okay.
9 of the original document?
Mhm.
C seems like a lot of stuff is lumped together there. Should the second sentence go into another?
Are you talking about the new C, the chair shall then call upon those members
Yeah.
of the public? What-
Yeah, the new C. Should the next sentence be starting of a D?
So it's grouped together because it's public comment.
Okay.
So
yeah.
it's sort of establishing an order for public comment. Again, this
So
speaks
that's
to.
all public comment?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
I see where you got it.
And Chairperson Ward had sort of alluded to this at the beginning of the meeting about a script to follow so that we're consistent in that procedure, in that order, calling for those in favor, those against, and then
Right.
bringing the applicant
And then
up to rebut.
Right, and then tell them they have 3 minutes to for or against or something.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Could I ask a question on page 22, 10 of the original document on board review? We had discussed before the possibility of having outside counsel. Should there be any statement about that in this section?
Let me read this.
5.4, or should we just?
What did happen to that?
I didn't find it anywhere in here, so I didn't know where it should go. I think I put a note about it earlier too, but I didn't bring it up.
Chair may direct this. This is just at a meeting if we wanted to call anyone back for questioning or clarification. We have that right to do, the board or the chair does. The board may call anyone back. But as far as the attorney thing, we discussed it, and then I don't know that it ever,
Well, we were
What do you
told
think?
that we didn't have any budget, but I was
Yeah.
told that we did. And whether or not there's money in the line item this year.
Well, I mean, it would
is
have to
not-
come as a request from us to the city council for
Yeah,
funds.
I don't-
And wouldn't be somebody that would be on call all the time, but just in situations when we had hearings that we felt we needed an outside counsel. When there's a situation that
Right.
we need to hear from somebody else.
I know when I was on the appraisal review board, we had outside counsel that wasn't related, they weren't counsel for the appraisal district, the tax office, or anybody. It was an outside counsel that we sought that just gave us some guidance on how to conduct our hearings and different things like that, didn't have any interest in the outcome of our hearing or any interest in Nacogdoches County. He
Was that for training purposes? What
Well,
was the
it was,
scope of the?
well, it was kind of, there was times we were wondering if we were being given kind of good guidance from the appraisal district. Because you got to remember, we're kind of like the appraisal review board is very similar to this board. We met in their chambers with their equipment and all, but we were actually an independent board of the appraisal review board's an independent board from the appraisal district. And so, it's just kind of that deal of familiarity. You're like, okay, am I really getting, is this really what we're supposed to be doing? And it wound up, there was a few things that they had said we could do that we could not do. And that attorney let us know, no, you can't do that. But we didn't know that because we were going on advice of the appraisal district. So I guess that's how we were thinking on this deal. I understand, and I had told Mr. Baker before, I understand his employment is to protect the city, and I respect that. That's his job. But if there's something going on that we need to know, do we need counsel to make sure that we're doing the job that we're supposed to be doing as an independent board?
And I can let our attorney speak a little bit to this, but in my experience in other cities, similar to engaging various boards that are appointed by the city council, there may be instances where an attorney or attorney's office, so some cities have multiple attorneys on staff, other cities may have one, other cities may completely use a third party
Right.
to facilitate legal representation on behalf of the city. There may be specific instances regarding a particular case or litigation or advice where outside counsel is brought in to provide expertise and direction based on their knowledge and experience in very specific cases. And I would assume, and this is kind of the assumption, we only briefly talked about this at the subcommittee, but the city council would have to authorize that and then dedicate resources to fund that. There may be an agreement with a third party to facilitate that kind of representation broadly. If there was a particular litigation or a particular instance where a third party was necessary for various reasons of expertise, that would also require a separate agreement. So
Right.
it
But we
doesn't
have
necessarily fall under day-to-day or meeting procedure as a matter of
No, it doesn't.
operation of the board.
But I think it's important to remember that we don't work for the city, and neither does city council. We all work for the people. So if we only hear the side of the city employee whose job it is to protect their interest, it's not really fair to the people. So I can see where there needs to be some, it wouldn't be something that we would use very often, but, and I don't know that 72 hours is enough time to figure that out.
Yeah.
So it puts us in a position of having to ask for a continuance in order to deal with that and discuss it publicly, and I don't know. I feel like it's something we should discuss with city council, because as you say, they do need to be part of the authorization process, unless we want to take up a collection.
Yeah.
Even then, I think council would have to sort of authorize it as an activity of the board.
Well, I was told by a city council member that we had the authority and that we had a budget to secure outside counsel if we felt that it was needed. I didn't follow up on the details of that, and it was Chad Huckabee that told me that, so.
Well, and another one told me that too, and it was not Chad.
Okay, so we've been told by two people.
Okay, no one told me anything.
Okay, I'm
but
telling you
No,
now.
no
I
one
know.
told me anything
No, but
either.
I'm just saying by experience with the appraisal review board, we had outside counsel. And I realized that this is a very similar board. That was county, we're separate.
Yeah.
We only answer to the public. Our job is to ensure the public trust and to make sure they felt like we listen to both sides when people are presenting evidence for appraisal review.
And that's why this board was set up by the state.
Yes.
This
the
board
zoning-
is a little weird as compared to other boards of the city, because this is actually a board that's established by the state. Right, Jerry? In state ordinance.
Well, it's provided in state ordinance, but the city council appoints you.
Right. But the board itself, the structure of the board
It's
is
the same as
established.
P&Z is in local government code too.
Right.
I think,
all
Again,
boards
the
are.
city council appoints the
Not all
P&Z.
boards.
Yeah, but aren't we the only board that this decision can only be appealed to a district court
Building Standards Commission, I believe.
Building standards.
and building standards? Okay.
So let me.
And that's how the appraisal review board is.
Sure.
It can only go to a district court.
Let me, if I may, make a suggestion that staff can bring back this particular issue as an item for the ZBA to recommend to the council separately.
Okay.
Okay,
And we would have probably some information that we would share about what other boards, how this board is distinguished from other boards in particular, maybe how this board functions as a matter of state law, and what the state law says in reference to or not in reference to this particular request. And then if there's a recommendation to seek council approval to pursue XYZ, in
Right.
particular outside counsel, maybe as a retaining, and this is where we get into for what specific purpose does it serve and how does it facilitate board action. We could sort of tease that out, put some good language together, and then if the board wanted to make a recommendation that council consider it, you could do that.
Did we not already do that?
I don't think so.
I don't think so, no, not that
When
I
we
know
had
of.
the discussion about all the issues that surrounded the situation that we had,
Yeah, but I
did
don't
we
think
not
we,
make recommendations?
no, I don't think we ever, that was just discussed at like a workshop, wasn't it? I mean, that was never discussed in a,
Yeah, it was a
Meeting.
workshop.
with minutes. And,
We don't have minutes of that meeting. Workshops we have to have minutes of all workshops. Every meeting we have to have minutes of.
right, but I
And we have to have
remember it wasn't.
recordings of too, correct, Amy?
There's minutes and recordings of
Yeah.
every meeting.
We need to go back and look at that meeting and see what, we couldn't take a vote in it, but I know
Right.
that we discussed it.
Well,
Well, I like the idea of a formal statement that you guys prepare and we discuss at the next meeting and maybe move it as an action of discussion.
To city council,
it would be a recommendation,
okay.
yeah.
Excellent.
Uh,
Are you okay with that?
I think that, so, and I'm recalling from previous experience, although limited, some of what led to this discussion among the board precedes me, but it was discussed a little bit during our subcommittee meetings, but it was sort of thrown in with everything
know.
else, procedure-wise. So getting this document to a state where it could be presented to ZBA was a goal as well. So this particular item may still be of interest. It didn't make it in under the current red lines. That doesn't mean we can't, maybe, it may make sense to set this aside and have the board sort of talk through that a little bit more. Okay? We're getting close to the end here. Other changes and strikes are simply to remove some redundancy. The exhibits, I'm not sure why there was an exhibit because it was redundant with some of the text internal. And we sort of talked through that at subcommittee level too. Was there a need for those exhibits? We've embedded that language, much of that language within the document. So as separate from the original document, there are no exhibits in this one.
Could I ask a question about page 23,
Yes.
5.8, on the vote required? The last, I think it's the next to the last sentence. A simple majority vote of the members shall be required to approve an alternative motion. The alternative motion is, this got really confusing to me. That's if a motion fails to get a second, then the next is an alternative motion, is that correct?
Well, if there's 5 people here and 3 people voted to deny it, then it would be denied. But it would take 4 to grant it, correct?
4 to grant it.
4 to
In
grant
the
it.
affirmative.
This is not the vote, this is the motion. This is dealing with a motion.
Okay, a motion to deny request shall pass on the vote of a simple majority.
So majority, let's say of 3, would be required to approve an alternate motion to take a vote.
And you could also do a motion to postpone, it says, or it's an example. To dispose, a simple majority shall be required to approve an alternative motion.
Yeah,
Should a
because-
motion to deny fail to receive a majority vote, another motion must be made. And I don't think any,
That could happen.
the reason this is confusing to me is this says an alternative motion, but that's referring to, should a motion to deny fail to receive a majority vote? Is that alternative motion referring to that? or to all of the above?
So refer to, so for example, if the motion to deny failed to receive a majority vote and somebody made a motion to postpone at that point, and it was seconded, then all you would require would be a majority, i.e. 3 votes instead of 4 supermajority.
To approve an alternative motion, because we're approving something, it usually takes 4 to approve. And they're saying on an alternative motion, a simple majority is all it takes to approve.
So
And a motion
let me
to
speak
deny.
to motions specifically. So one person moves, another person seconds, that's 2. That's to put the motion on the floor for a vote,
For discussion.
for discussion. In the affirmative, if it's a motion to deny, this language says that there are a majority, 3, that would be required to allow a motion for a vote. Does that make sense? So in the affirmative of a normal vote, typically what ZBA does, a motion and a second allows the motion to be voted on the floor. If it's a motion to deny, there would be a majority of members that would have to allow that motion to be voted on the floor,
No.
and
it's-
alternate motions to be voted on the
It
floor.
says here that should a motion to deny fail to receive a
Big
majority
majority
vote.
vote,
It's
another
the
motion
motion to
must be
deny,
made.
not the motion to put it on the floor.
Right, the motion to deny only needs a majority vote. So if it fails to receive that, there could be another motion to postpone this item for another hearing or something like that.
There's been
But-
times that we've had a motion to deny the request and it failed for lack of a second.
Right.
Correct.
And then there's,
But not to put it on the floor for discussion. Which
And
you're
no
just
one
saying,
seconds
you just
Yeah.
said that you'd have to have a majority vote to put it on the floor for discussion, but it's not, it's just a motion and a second.
I thought Robert's
separate.
rules is it's a motion and a second
Second,
and then
yes.
there's discussion.
I'm sorry, that's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay, because you don't have to vote whether to have discussion. You just have to have a motion and a second.
Correct,
And
you're
then you
correct.
discuss, and then when all
You're correct.
discussion is over, you can then, or someone can jump up and call the question. But then you have to vote on calling the question. And then that either fails or prevails, and then you go back to where you
Yeah,
were at.
I think, Jerry, please correct me, the intent here is to, it puts the highest burden on the affirmative. It puts the highest burden on approving the request.
Correct. So
So-
to approve an application for a variance, you need a supermajority, 4
Right.
votes.
Right, okay.
And let's say that the vote was 3-2. Then the request is denied, period. And you could just be done.
Correct.
But somebody could say, well, let's say that nobody wants to make a motion to approve. And they say, well, I make a motion to deny. I've heard that's what happened with the
Mm-hmm.
duplex thing. And then all we needed was a simple majority because they
Right.
would never get the motion to approve if you
Right.
had a majority to deny.
And
And
if you
then you're
didn't get
done.
it, if you didn't get a majority to deny it, then somebody could then, at that point, make a motion to postpone this to the next hearing, for example.
Okay,
All you would need then is a simple majority to approve that motion to postpone.
Okay.
I think that's what that second last sentence is saying.
well, what is for example, motion to approve? How would that fit?
You're approving to postpone.
But then it says, comma, motion to postpone, et cetera. But motion to approve sounds like you're going back to the beginning and voting on granting the appeal.
The motion to postpone would be just a simple majority.
I understand that, but right before.
She's
it
saying,
says
for example, why
motion.
does it say motion to approve? in
Yeah,
the
and
example?
I kind of question that anyway, because we're not always just voting on approving variances.
Right.
We may be voting on an appeal. So if we vote on an appeal and we vote to approve the appeal, do we have to have 4 votes for that?
Yes, you do. That's granting an appeal. But
Well-
what does motion to approve mean down?
Yeah, that,
This could also be just, for example, a motion to approve these rules. You don't need a supermajority to approve that.
Because we're not granting an appeal.
Right. The only time you're gonna.
Okay,
work
I
with-
understand now, thank you, I get it. There is an example where you could have a motion to approve that would not be an appeal, that requires a simple majority. Thank you, Jerry. So, like, we're gonna vote on this.
Mhm. And all it takes is a simple
And
majority.
it would just take a majority to pass it,
Correct,
not a super majority, because it's not an appeal
correct.
or a variance. on its own.
Because that refers back to Robert's Rules of Order.
No, I don't think it has anything to do with that. It has to do with the rules
What
of
do you-
the ZBA, state rules, I guess. I don't, doesn't every,
And that
doesn't
referred
the
back
state rules
to,
say it has to be a
why is it-
supermajority?
Well, we're using the language, any
why is
request
it only
made to
just
the
a
board.
regular, majority and not super?
So this rules of procedure is an action brought
Of the
by the
board.
board to the board. So any request
In
made
local
to the
government
board,
Right.
we could always clarify by an applicant or something. But it's in reference to bringing items for action that pertain to variances, special exceptions.
And it might
in
be good
particular
that,
property.
it might be, to say maybe at the top, at the heading there, voting requirements for applicants or appeals or something like that.
I'm not so sure, we might not have to have that in two sections, votes, a vote requirement for appeals and then for variances. Because isn't it, it's different?
I think appeals and variances all need a supermajority.
It would still require a supermajority for both.
Okay,
We're talking about the appeal of the city planner's decision,
right.
correct, you would still need a
Okay.
supermajority
But.
But-
to approve the appeal, right?
Right, but if it's a variance, does it have to be a supermajority?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
But the only time it doesn't have to be is like voting on these rules,
Or similar action.
or voting to postpone.
Where is,
Something like, yes.
Okay.
Where is that?
So, for example, the action that you just took to postpone the meeting in June to a different date, for example.
That's
That all it
considered,
required was a simple majority.
that's just, considered an alternative motion,
Okay,
where it says
I understand.
alternative motion.
well, I don't know, I mean, we may understand, but that's not clear in this.
No, it really isn't, because we had to discuss it for a long time.
It needs to be clarified in this because we all are going to go away at some point. And
The new
though
people will have to.
we may understand it, but it needs to be there for posterity for those that come after us.
I mean, maybe we could say something, a simple majority vote of the members shall be required to approve anything other than appeals of city planner's decision, variances, special exceptions.
Right.
And leave it at that. So it's very clear that anything else besides those three things, which by law require supermajority, we're only talking about a simple.
Right, that's what, I'm thinking it should have been another paragraph. I think it needs to be two paragraphs. I think it needs to then, so that it doesn't look like you're still referring to variances and appeals.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, maybe where it says a motion to deny request shall pass on the vote of a simple majority of the members, and then where it says should a motion, I'm thinking you could do another paragraph, should a motion to deny fail to receive a majority vote, another motion must be made. For example, motion to approve, to dispose of the case. And then, I don't know, I just think that needs to be in two paragraphs.
So what you're saying is distinguish sections by vote required by 4 members and vote required by
Yes,
simple
yes,
majority?
yes, yes, what requires a 4-member vote and what requires a supermajority.
Well.
Or a simple,
simple.
not a simple majority.
So in the first sentence, if you struck the last phrase, any request made to the board, and replaced it with appeals, variances, and exceptions?
Made to the
Or
board.
something,
Uh-huh.
whatever the category of items are
That
would
we hear.
require the simple, and so that it's clear to everybody what, exactly, yeah.
No, and I think that the language that I've honed in on, we need to clarify, in particular for these procedural rules, speaks to that first sentence, at the end of that sentence, this is any request made to the board. That'd be a request for a variance, a request for a special exception, an appeal
Like
request.
parentheses, example.
Or just necessitating and distinguishing the supermajority requirement and the majority. Yeah, you can do that.
Because Amy made a request to the board that we change the date, so.
Well,
So,
she suggested that I bring that up.
I know, but I'm
Yes.
just saying, it's.
Okay. We are at the end of our red line section. Are there any other comments?
On page 12 of the original document, 24 of the document in the materials for today, on On this discussion of where it says that, I don't want to read the whole sentence, but starting as the case may be for a period of 90 days from the date of the favorable action of the board, unless said board shall have in its action approved a different period of time. That's not really that 90 days. They're supposed to start taking the action within 90 days, correct? Okay.
Yes.
Who oversees that? To make sure that the action is actually taken within the 90 days?
Our permits office.
Okay.
yes, Yeah.
And, but then it also says, in no event, however, shall additional time granted, so that means that they can be granted time beyond the 90 days. And who decides that?
That would be granted by zoning board of adjustment.
So it would have to come back for the zoning board of adjustment to grant
extend.
that?
Yes.
Okay, so they have to come back and ask the ZBA for additional time. And it's not the planning office that decides that additional time.
Right, so
Correct. Because it would essentially render the action to approve that request null and void after 90 days if no action has actually been taken.
Because it says all rights thereunder are
So
terminated.
we,
If they don't apply for a building permit
Mm-hmm.
from 90 days from the date we grant a variance, then it's null and, they've got
So
to come
that
back.
90 days is, they need to apply for the building permit within 90 days. Okay. And they can't get an extension on that
unless they request that from the board.
from the board. That comes back to the board to request that.
we have similar expirations that allow for extensions with preliminary plats and with our specific use permit process. That one's 180 days. So there are similar timelines that are established as the basis of these actions.
And the planning office checks to make sure that they're within that 90 days. Okay.
We discussed quite lengthy what happened when Larry and I were served papers at the beginning of the meeting and how to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And we talked about including an executive session on every agenda in case it was needed so that we could.
It's been on the ones, the last couple of ones. I don't know if it's on this one because we weren't hearing anything except this. But it was on
It's
the
here.
it was on the last agenda.
Is that something that needs to be in the rules and procedures or?
It's in the rules of procedure.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
Let me get there. It's on page 16, document page 4, page 16, part 2.7, open meetings. That's one reference to executive sessions.
I saw that, but that's not.
I think we had called it out in a couple of
It's
other.
right above that.
Is it right above that?
2.7, open meetings, and.
Oh, there you
right
go.
above
Part
there,
D, I'm sorry. Executive
All meetings
sessions.
of the board excluding executive sessions.
If you go
No,
up
go
one
up
to
one more to
2.6,
D.
Part D, it's just above that, I'm sorry.
Executive sessions closed meeting, the board may
Right here,
convene.
and we're right in
It
here.
says may convene into executive session pursuant. Yeah, but what she's saying is that we asked for it to be put on all the agendas, and you're asking, is it in here that it's on all the agendas? Is that right, Maggie? Is that what you're asking?
I'm asking whether putting it on every agenda needs to be part of the rules and procedures.
Yeah.
Since we decided it was in.
I asked for it as the chair to be put on while I'm chair. Now, I don't know what the next chair will do.
We can state it within the procedures. It's a matter of practice we've already adopted. I mean, we can restate that in the procedures as well, that it be placed on the agenda. Currently, it's in the certification section. So if you've got, we all have the same packet, I believe. Look at the cover page at the bottom. There's certification. It trails into the second page, but there's a reference of the right for the board to adjourn into executive session.
Yes, and that's now in
So
all of ours.
that is our
right here.
standard agenda
This is our-
template language.
This is now our
So we're-
new deal.
Yeah.
This
Sure.
meeting will be conducted, and we reserve the right to adjourn into executive anytime during the meeting.
Okay,
That
because it
used to not
does-
be in there.
It does, that last sentence proper notice under the Texas Open Meetings Act is required in order for the board to participate in executive session. So that means that it has to be on the agenda.
On every agenda.
Yeah, and it
Correct.
is. It's on this one.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, okay,
I'm
yes,
just
yes.
wondering if that.
Well, I think they've now made it,
If it should be in the rules of the procedures that it's put on there, or if we're just gonna handle it.
So that's part of facilitating, allowing the board to convene into executive session for those purposes. Putting that language in the agenda is how we execute that allowance. Does that make sense?
You might just add to that on page 16, under D. You might just add just a statement, even a parenthetical statement. The board will have
oh, you know, it could also, I
session.
mean, you could put in there, this will become a part of the agenda or
Become
something.
part of all agendas or
Yeah.
something.
Okay.
Could I ask a question?
What are we doing?
Could I ask a question about
16, this section right
I don't know, what do we want?
page 24,
here. Something about.
8.3 on the review? Do we really need to review these every year? Because, I mean, I've been on this board now I'm in my second term. Before the first time we went through these, we had never reviewed them. So, I don't know, I kind of wonder if yearly is overkill, personally.
Well, it could just be a matter of saying, these are working really well, or it could be a matter of, we don't need to change anything, or it could be saying, well, everything worked except this one thing, but.
Well, I mean, we reviewed them last year and had a whole bunch of markups, and now we've got a whole bunch of markups this year.
Yeah.
I just don't want to see us to get into a situation where every year we have a packet like this with all these markups in it.
Well, I think that we're working towards not having packets with markups because it had not been done in so long. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And
That-
we're having so many other conversations about the zoning ordinance. I think that sort of infused a lot of bulk changes within this document that you typically wouldn't see.
Would not see,
Yeah.
because it's been so long that it was updated.
Yeah, and I think.
It has been a while.
It was.
I think
Yeah.
it would be, it may be beneficial for staff to have this as a guide too. If there are state changes, state law changes, if they're emergent and they require immediate change, we bring those ahead of whatever annual process
Right, because
we
there could
have.
be something in this legislative session that'll take effect September 1 of this year or January, and then we would have to change it.
But it also allows, especially when there's board turnover, it allows new members to sort of look at it with fresh eyes. So certainly, we don't have to have that in there. That's simply a matter for the board to either choose to keep or not. But it is helpful in a lot of ways, even if there's not much change from year to year.
I have no problem with it, just so for new board members, it will kind of force them to read this. Because some of them
And
may
to
never
talk
read
about
it.
is very
Yeah,
helpful to
exactly.
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
For me.
Do I need a motion to make the changes that we have discussed, or,
I think it might be better for us to, if there was no action, we would bring this back. Some of the changes are substantive enough. We'd want to show you a
Okay.
much clearer document.
right.
It would still look like this red line. We would probably use a different color so we could reflect changes as discussed
that were
here.
made at this meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I don't need any kind of motion now?
I don't think there'd be any action.
Okay,
And this would take effect, once we do vote on it, let's say it's in June.
yeah.
May.
Then it,
May.
May.
May. Then there was language in here about it taking effect at the next meeting.
So it would take effect once, at the meeting following council's approval of the
Oh, it
rules of
has to be
procedure.
approved by council,
Mhm.
so we're a ways out.
Yeah.
So right now, we're still going on the acting chair.
Yes.
We don't have a vice chair yet.
And
Right.
and the selection of alternates is under
still
current
the-
procedure.
It's still the
Um,
previous procedure.
All those changes we've discussed would take effect upon
All right.
new rules of procedure being approved.
Does anybody else have any more questions about the rules? Okay. The next item on the agenda is the zoning ordinance subcommittee report. And did you want to report on that, Mr. New, or do you want Maggie and I to say what we've?
I'd love for you guys
I'm
to
struggling
take the lead
remember
here.
what we did.
Well, we decided it wasn't called beauty parlor anymore.
Yeah.
So, beauty salon, tattoo studio.
We've been meeting, gosh, for 2 hours a time or more for what, the last 4 months or better?
It's been very helpful. I think the perspectives of each of the groups and how they look at these decisions from their end has been positive. And plus,
Yeah.
it allows staff to get buy-in when we bring these forward. It's not just hitting you like a wet phone book. You have some knowledge and awareness. Others that haven't been able to participate in subcommittees don't have that benefit. But there is representation, and certainly the feedback has been very constructive, I think. So one thing that did recently go before the Planning and Zoning Commission was the tattoo studio, definitions for tattoo studio, beauty salon, and body piercing studio. That is slated to go before council for consideration on May 6th
Okay.
at their next meeting.
Mr. Sloan and Jacqueline, for y'all that didn't know, we're having a zoning ordinance subcommittees, and there's two representative from ZBA, which is Maggie and me, and then there's two from P and Z. There's two city council members, and then Juan and Amy and Mr. New and Jerry are part of that. And we've been meeting about once a month for a little 2 hours or more, going over literally the whole zoning ordinance and even going over definitions of buildings and everything, and just trying to get it. It hadn't been done since the 70s, is that correct?
Well, there's been several
Okay.
changes here and there to various ordinances, including the zoning ordinance as recent as 3 or 4 years ago.
But it hadn't had this kind of an overhaul.
Not as comprehensive as we are going
Yeah.
through. And we're sort of trying to take a scalpel to it rather than a blunt hammer, because we're trying to address very specific issues and talk through those issues and
Yeah.
make sure that if and when we make changes, that they are clear, and they move us in the direction I think the group is interested in seeing.
But it's been
So-
very interesting.
Well, why don't y'all get to tell all the fun?
You wanna come?
You want to, I will
Visitors are
definitely,
welcome.
you could take my place one day.
Yeah, you can sit down.
The next meeting of the group is next week, so we'll be tackling some more off-street parking. We'll be discussing that a little bit in detail.
Okay.
We've still got other large umbrella issues that were sort of discussed at the August workshop, non-conforming uses, other district development standards in addition to off-street parking. And I think plan developments was another one. It's a unique zoning district. We haven't really talked too much about any of those. We've sort of been carrying those over as we get through our discussions. So there's still a lot to discuss among the subcommittee, but we found it to be productive.
Yeah, it has been. I've learned a lot.
I think it's gonna help a lot when you put these changes before city council, that they've had an opportunity to discuss it and think about it and.
And I think transparency among the groups
Yes.
has
Yes,
been
very helpful.
It's been very
helpful too. And we do post that information. If you're curious about what this subcommittee has discussed and recommended so far, that is online. And we can share the short URL, nactx.us/ZOS, Zoning Ordinance Subcommittee. It's all there. We try to keep everything that we're discussing, information that we're sharing as part of the agendas are on that page. So we can always refer folks to there if they're curious about what the subcommittee is discussing.
There's usually chips and cold cuts and.
Yeah, sugar
I
and salt is part of it, yeah.
I was gonna say, there's Cheetos.
And napkins for Cheetos, yeah. Our
Okay.
meetings, since our meetings are so far off, we probably don't want to bring those leftovers back to this group.
Is there any other business before us? Hearing none, our meeting's adjourned.
Can you state the time, please?
Pardon me?
State the time.
At 5:28.